All right, all right, all right. Welcome to a moment that will be recorded and celebrated 10 years from now, the inaugural tallchuck.com
The
podcast.
inaugural one.
My name is Philip Miller. I am a trial lawyer and strategist from Canada, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Charles Bennett, colloquially known as tallchuck.com, and the biggest personal injury lawyer in the state of Texas. How do you feel on your first podcast today, my friend?
Good. Yeah, this is kind of familiar. I've done some stuff similar to this, but this is
Well, this is our opportunity to allow people to get to know you a little better, know what inspires you, and share some stories that show we have aligned interests in making a difference in the world.
yeah.
You know, and anybody can tell by your handle that you probably were a basketball player. You were a professional basketball player. How did you go from professional basketball player to killer personal injury lawyer?
So I played 8 years of professional basketball in Europe, all over Western Europe, Spain, Sweden, Belgium, Turkey, Poland. And then after that, I came back. I finished in 2008, came back to the States in 2009, and kind of was trying to figure out what am I going to do with the rest of my life and where am I going to go, and started a computer company that I partnered with a guy, and we did really well for several months, and then he decided that it was all because of him and he wanted to keep the money. And so he kicks me out and throws all my stuff in the parking lot, and then sues me to try to keep the money. And that was really my first experience in the kind of the legal system. And it was frightening, but it was also enlightening and fascinating to me at the same time. And that lawsuit went on for about 3 years, and about a year and a half into it, I decided to take the LSAT and go to law school. And I like the strategy part of it. I love the gamesmanship, and then the competitiveness was obviously very similar to what I dealt with in professional basketball. So it was very much home to me to be in litigation, and that's kind of the angle that I went through law school and then afterwards.
Yeah, I was watching some of your clips. One of the things I found, having been in the military doing some interesting stuff, and what I find is missing in law, there's a lot of bravado, but there are very few people who can remain calm under pressure. And I can see how calm you were in some high pressure situations in sport. Do you find you're able to take some of that and apply it to your practice, and how?
I think that's a big part of almost everything that we do is we have to show the clients, one, that we're willing to fight for them throughout their case, but then there's always, as you know, being a trial lawyer is things happen in court that just can't be expected, just like whether it's in the military or on the basketball court, and you've got to be able to kind of go with the flow and think on your feet and adjust your strategy in real time to what the judge is doing, what the other side is doing, what the jury's doing. And I think that's true of the litigation leading up to trial, because we don't go to trial that much. Obviously, most of our cases end before trial in the strategizing of what moves are they going to make, and how do I counter those moves and prevent kind of preempt those moves before they happen, is a big part of preparing for a basketball game, and is a huge part of being a litigator in the personal injury field.
I think in Dallas, there's something. You're a larger than life individual. Anybody who has the time to get to know you, understated but over delivering. But what I was fascinated by when we were chatting at dinner last night was this connection you have with the locals in Dallas through basketball. And I wonder if you could, tell me that with the passion you did last night about how much it meant to you, what your dad was doing, and why that ties you to this city.
So I grew up in Carrollton, which is northwest of downtown Dallas, and kind of in the suburbs. And so my dad, who's an electrical engineer and wasn't really athletic, but he's very analytical and logical, and he's a great coach. He coached me all the way up through junior high, even to how to play. But he figured out that I needed to go where the good players were. And so he would take me to the best gyms in Dallas, and a lot of those were down in South Dallas, where there's Beckley Sainer Recreation Center, or some of the, like W.T. White, or some of the more famous high schools that we would just go down there and play pickup game. And pickup games, and sometimes he would just drop me off on Saturday mornings and come back a few hours and pick me up, and sometimes a lot of times he would stay and coach, and we were in leagues together, and so he really taught me a lot of things about not only just work ethic but about how to mix with different kinds of people and learn different skills, because the things that we were doing in Carrollton, where I grew up, was a lot different type of basketball than what they were playing in other parts of Dallas. And so through those connections of knowing those people, and then being a good player in high school, and being in the paper and seeing my other friends in the paper and kind of competing against guys, was important. And some of those ties that I have from high school are still here in the community. So like I was at a fundraiser last night, and one of the guys that was working the fundraiser I know from high school, playing basketball, and he ran up to me, and we recognized each other from across the party, and we started talking about who we used to play with and who we used to play against, and kind of what we're doing with our lives. And so those connections, I think, are important to what I'm trying to do in the community as a lawyer, and kind of cleaning up some of the the bad company owners and the bad properties, and trying to make sure that people are doing things in a safe way and not hurting people.
Yeah, like I feel like people who are watching this aren't even getting the kind of the kindness and the giving nature that you bring to the table, and I'm just thinking about how what happens to us as kids that sometimes we don't think is that important actually really shapes the man or woman we become. And when you're telling the story, like I can picture like this tall white kid with a dad who's smart enough to give a shit and put you in positions that are difficult, dropping you off at a gym where you might be the only white guy there, but it didn't matter as a kid playing ball,
No.
right?
It didn't, and it didn't matter to me, and it didn't matter to the guys I was playing with or against, and so I just grew up around them, and they were just my friends and my teammates and competitors. And then later on, as we grow and we kind of learn more about what's going on in the city and what's going on in the state and the country, and it's just like having those experiences with those people, in those kind of deeper connections with people that I've been playing basketball with my whole life is important, because I can, when clients come in to talk to me, when I'm meeting for them for the first time, I always, where are you from? How did you get here? Where did you go to school? What did you do for work? And there's always some kind of a connection through what part of town they're in, or where they, people that we know, and things that have happened in Dallas over the years that really helps me to connect with the client and gain and show them that I'm there to help them, but I'm also here for a bigger purpose of just trying to help the city and help people to do things in a safe way.
It's just for me I came down from Canada obviously to interview, and I found out about what you're doing, and we'll talk about the Justice College later and your firm. But it's what I was struck as kind of an outsider coming into this jurisdiction is there's a lot of billboard lawyers, it looks like, and I think I do personal injury trial lawyer up north, but how do we get away from, or what differentiates you from those kind of billboard lawyers who seem to be all about the marketing but not about the caring?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the marketing, they try to do what is flashy. And so they put numbers up, and they put things that they think are going to get people's attention, and then other people follow that, and everybody keeps doing the same thing. But I think what we as lawyers lose track of and understanding of is, like, what is our purpose supposed to be in this society? Why are there personal injury lawyers? I mean, you do criminal defense up in Canada, and we were talking about this last night, is that prosecutors, the guys you're going against, are there to prosecute criminals and to deter future crime. Right. So it's not just about the person that they're prosecuting that trial, but it's also to show the public that if somebody does this in our town, that we're going to prosecute them. And your job as a criminal defense lawyer is to make sure that the state proves their case. not just for the defendant that you're representing, but also for future defendants to show the state that, look, if you bring a bullshit claim, I'm going to be there to make sure that the jury knows that this is wrong.
Does that have a correlation in the personal injury world in Texas?
I think it does. In getting back to your question about the billboard, the billboards that we see in the marketing that we see only focusing on the numbers, is that we lose track of what the purpose of a personal injury lawyer should be. It's not just about maximizing the amount of money that we get for this one client. It's about showing these defendants that if they do something that they know is dangerous and they hurt somebody, that we as personal injury lawyers are coming after them, and we're going to keep coming after them until they do things the right way. And you were talking about this earlier, is my goal is that I don't have any more cases because everybody's doing their job safely. And it sounds counterintuitive, but to want people to do things the right way should be what personal injury lawyers are about.
And we're just fortunate that human nature, from a professional perspective, human nature is such that there will always be people who are willing to break the rules or take shortcuts. And if you don't have somebody who will police them, and I think that's something people need to know, because politicians can kind of attack certain types of lawyers, but who polices the corporations that are focused on profits over customer safety? Like there was, I saw a really, I don't want to say tender because it might be a little unmasculine for us tough military and sports guys, but I saw you just got something delivered to your office today with a lawyer about a case. Why don't you tell us about that case and why that was important to you?
So for my big cases in our firm, or important cases that we've worked on for a long time, or that there's an important connection, I usually do, at the end of the case, I take a photo with the clients, and then internally in the office, I'll do like a poster or like a frame that includes like photos and pleadings and important things from that case. And so we just got delivered this one from an ATV rollover that killed a 10-year-old. And we were with that family working on that case for 4 years, and it ended earlier this year. And so our office got one of these posters together, and we just got it delivered. So I took it into Andrew's office, my associate, and I handed it to him. And both of us kind of got emotional about it, because all of those memories come back from those 4 years of all of the stuff that we went through and all of the stuff that we saw the clients go through that entire case. And that's why I do that stuff, because if we don't tell our story, who will tell our story? And if I'm not able to, as a law firm, to tell the important stories of the cases that we have, nobody else is going to do it. And that's what gives meaning to what we're doing.
That's why I love the parallels, why we do criminal defense and personal injury, because there are two elements of law that are easy to attack. You know, if you've never been on the business end of an injustice. So until you've been charged with something you didn't do, you don't know what the value of a good criminal defense attorney is. And until you've been hurt by the negligence of somebody else, you don't know how important. And when you describe the 10-year-old who was killed in that rollover, the impact you had on the family is monumental. Like really, you're a hero to that family. But it's unfortunate that in politics and in some circles, you can be treated like a villain. I think because the whole profession doesn't care as much as you do. But when I saw the emotion on you two, like big, powerful lawyers get emotional just looking at the picture, right? It's not like you're doing high fives because of how much money you got. You guys missed it up because of how much you cared about the family, even though the number was quite high. But it just lends some credence to working with somebody who cares and who you can trust is so important. You work with a lot of, I wouldn't say newer lawyers, younger lawyers. You work with some senior lawyers, but I think one of the things a lot of people don't know about you is how much work you do helping lawyers learn how to win trials. How did you get into that, and why is that a passion of yours?
Well, my mom's a teacher, and so she taught my sister when she was in elementary school, and then my mom became the dean of students at the Court Reporting Institute of Dallas here for 20 years. And so still when I go to court, or when I have depositions and I see the court reporters, I'll ask them where they go to school. And a lot of them know my mom still.
Oh, cool.
And so so the combination of having a mom who's a teacher, And then dad, who was an electrical engineer and so logical, and he's former military as well. And so he taught me how to be very regimented. And that combination makes me want to teach other people and teach other lawyers. And I've been blessed with a bunch of very, very good mentors in my career so far. And I try to keep them around me as much as I can. But I also recognize that what they did for me, not every lawyer gets. And so one of my goals in my career is to bring other lawyers and mentor other lawyers in the right way to do things, in the right way to think about things, because we do get vilified as plaintiffs lawyers when they hear that we take a percentage of the amount of money that we get for our clients. They immediately accuse us of being greedy. And I think that the billboards play into that. When they're seeing these massive verdicts and these massive settlements on billboards, and they're like, oh, it's just all about the money. And so we have to teach these lawyers and the right way to practice, the way that I was taught to practice, and it's my job to hand that down to the next generations that are coming up.
What I like, having seen you teach, is you give lawyers almost the confidence to believe in their character, because there's all these pressures. Make money, you're vilified, but they're almost like kind of lonely samurais sometimes, that you have to fight this fight that is life and death to the client that you represent. But what stands apart when I look at your practice compared to other lawyers I've interviewed is you actually welcome being surrounded by people who have skill sets that you don't have and who are smarter than you. Like, you're not an ego-driven attorney, and you can see it in the team. Like, you have an amazing appellate lawyer, you have an amazing researcher, you have an amazing ex-judge. Like, I haven't seen that in many firms, because most of the firms want to be the hero. Mm-hmm. And I love how you make your clients the hero, and you just guide them to help get their life back.
I think that's well. So I think that we all see the world in terms of the analogies or the metaphors that we know that are personal to us. So I see the world in terms of basketball. I see the world in terms of music. I play the guitar and I played the drums in college, and so that's kind of I relate everything that I do back to prior things that I've had in my life. You relate a lot of things to military. When we talk. Some of my other friends, that I've got a black belt in jiu-jitsu, who's a very good friend of mine, and he sees the world in terms of jiu-jitsu. And so
is that the jiu-jitsu cowboy lawyer?
That's the jiu-jitsu cowboy lawyer in Louisiana.
He's going to be a guest on your podcast.
Absolutely.
Next time. He's amazing.
Kyle Sherman. And so for me, well, on the side of that is I've got a very good friend here in Dallas who's a baseball player, and his dad was a baseball coach for a long time. And so he sees the world in terms of baseball. And we'll sit around and he likes watching basketball with me. I like watching baseball with him, just like I enjoy watching jiu-jitsu with Kyle, because the same strategies that I use in basketball, they use in their respective sports or talents. And it's the same process that we go through. It's just a different way of seeing the world. And so when I'm teaching other lawyers and I'm trying to give confidence to them, it's to say, lean into the metaphors that you know, lean into the way that you see the world, because that's how you process information. And, one of the, we criticize a lot of times when other lawyers teach other lawyers and say, oh, just be yourself. Mm-hmm. Because what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything if you don't give context to it. But I think when I say just be yourself, I give the context of be yourself in terms of the analogies and metaphors that you know from your life. So if you see the world in terms of military, then make your law practice in terms of military and your preparation in terms of what you already know, because that makes it easy for you. And so when I'm building my law firm, I'm building a team. I can't win a game with 5 Shaqs on the floor.
Yeah.
I can't win a game with 5 Steph Currys on the floor. I've got to mix and match talents in order to be able to give the best product and the best representation of my clients. So I have, I have a researcher, I have an in-house appellate lawyer, I have a coverage counsel for insurance questions, and all of these different minds that see the world differently than I do help me to be able to work cases in the best way that I can.
The word team is something that I think is worth digging into a bit, because when I went through law school, after having served in some special units in the military, I was just struck at how uncooperative and unteam-like. I believe the law school is probably one of the most dysfunctional places I've ever seen, because it took high-functioning individuals who were very ambitious and then made them want to compete against each other, and it brought out the worst in them. And there was really no mentorship. If somebody said, "Hey, like you have a responsibility to do good in the world, or to be a person of good character, and that you need to work with others." And so then the lawyers go out into the marketplace, and then they feel, because they went through law school like that, that they have to keep acting like they're the center. And you so seldom hear team from lawyers. And the way a sports background or a military background tells you that you can't win without knowing how to build a team. And I've seen it from your trial records, how that makes a huge difference. But when I watch you teach these young lawyers, I can almost see them breathe a sigh of relief that it's actually okay for them to work with people. They don't have to be everything by themselves. And, they've been carrying a case that they know could be worth a lot, but they're almost embarrassed to say, "I need help."
Right.
And so they're faking it. And they're just blessed to come into contact with you and your team, because you help them elevate their case. Like, do you have any good stories about how you've helped lawyers in that circumstance?
Well, so one of my rules in my office and when I go and consult and work with other lawyers is that we never start a question with no but. It's always yes and, because we're adding to ideas instead of like no but is no is cuts it off and but brings it back, where yes and are both addition words to take somebody's thoughts and add to them. And I think one of the reasons why personal injury lawyers can be so like lonely samurais is because of how we traditionally pay them. So a lot of law firms will pay their personal injury lawyers as a straight commission. So they're pulling a draw in, and they set their draw for the year, but the only way that they get paid is through the amount of cases that they settle on their own. And so it kills the collaboration within a firm, and there's not any kind of sharing of ideas. The way I do it is I pay my guys a salary plus a bonus based on what we settle. And the idea is that we roundtable cases all the time. And when one of the hardest things to learn as a personal injury lawyer is, how do I handle bad cases? What do I do with bad cases? Because good cases are fun to work on. When you've got like a drunk driver that rear-ends your client, and the company knew they were a drunk driver and they had multiple, like those cases are so much fun to work on because there's so much fruit to play with. But when you've got a case that's very difficult and it's hard to see how the defendant was a bad person, it's like, what do you do with that case? And if you're on a straight commission and you've got 100 cases and 50 of them are good and 50 of them are bad and difficult, which ones are you going to work on? You're only going to work on the good ones. And so you're left after a couple of years, you keep getting rid of all your good cases and you're stuck with just a pile of bad cases and you have no idea what to do with them. So what I do is I go to my young lawyers and I say, okay, we're going to focus really hard on these bad, difficult cases, and we're going to try to get them out of our lives by doing the best we can for our client. But then that way we can focus on the good cases where we can make the biggest difference in our clients' lives and the biggest difference in society.
It's interesting. Anybody who's young or old will relate to this. It's how we schedule our days. Like, we avoid the tough things, we do the easy things, pick up the phone and scroll when people are talking to us.
Right.
Watch TV, go to sleep, eat junk food. But from developing the profession, the hard cases are where you learn. And if you're never touching the hard cases because you need to settle to cover your draw, you're putting years in the experience box, but you're not putting challenge in the experience box. So that's that's just a very cool way to mentor. I've found in law there's very, very poor mentoring. It's like, throw them out there and it makes people angry and cold and calculating.
I had a young lawyer that came to work with me for a little while, and I handed him some cases that were smaller cases and they were somewhat difficult. He comes in, I need him to prove to me that he's willing to do the hard work. And he comes back a couple weeks later and he says, "I'm not your associate. I'm not going to work on these cases." And I'm like, well, there's the door. Because he didn't want to learn how to handle the bad cases or the difficult cases. I'm like, that's what being a lawyer is. If you can't call your client and have the difficult conversation of, say, look, I've been working on this case for a year and I don't see any way that we can make any money on this thing. And I'm so sorry, but we've got to move on. If you can't have that conversation with your client, then you're not being a lawyer. If the only conversations you have are, hey, here's a big check, you're not actually learning how to practice law.
Yeah, and then there's kind of a hope. I think some lawyers take in that case selection as well. They take on a case and they kind of hope that an insurance company writes a check, and then the client is being strung along, and you're actually hurting the client because you're hoping for a paycheck. And
Yeah, the client's got the hope the whole time of, oh, this is going to be $1 million because that's what I see on the billboard, and they never have those tough conversations with their client.
that's why it's important for people to do research on the character of the lawyer or law firm that they hire, not just a billboard. Because once you get in, it's hard to get out of that law.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to trust people in general nowadays. And if we're not willing to have the difficult conversations with people, our clients, then there's not going to be any trust there. Honesty is the best way to get trust. And if you go to somebody and say, look, I'm sorry that you're hurt. I'm sorry this happened to you, but we can't blame this company for what happened to you. Or they're not going to pay, they're never going to pay any money for this. If we can't have those conversations, then we're doing a disservice to the client.
That reminds me of I'm sure you've had it as well, but I had a personal injury client come in, and I think we forget that the goal is to have a human being get their life back. The goal is not to get them to be in 3 years of treatment trying to make it seem more serious so they get more money.
Right.
And then I remember talking to somebody and saying, hey, look, I think you're recovering well. And they had been told, oh, I'm like, look, you're happy. You could have been killed. Like, could I work this up and make us a few $100,000 each? I'm like, perhaps, but at an expense of you spending 3 years pretending to be hurt, which is going to hurt you psychologically. It's going to hurt your relationships. So I think what we have to remember is they come to us and almost from like a sacred perspective, they need us to help fix their life. Sometimes fixing their life, it's not a monetary solution. It's being honest, the way you're talking about that. And have you ever turned away clients like in that circumstance?
Oh, yes, we have to. And I hear all the time from lawyers when they say, well, I don't have good cases. My client, the clients that I get are bad clients, or they always have bad cases. I'm like, no, what you're doing is you're settling your good cases as soon as they come in the door, and you're spending years with your bad cases. And so in your mind, all you think about is, all I've got is bad cases. Once you flip that on its head and you say, okay, I'm going to focus on getting these bad cases out of my life and being honest with my clients about these cases that are not going to turn out any good, then I can focus my entire energy on the good cases. And I get out of bed every morning saying, almost every case in my law firm is a good case that I enjoy working on. And if it's not, I'm going to focus on it for a little while, figure out how to solve it and get it out of my life, and then go back to the good cases.
Yeah, and I was, before we started, I was encouraging you. I think it's honorable how humble you are, but I think there's a tendency to understate how much you help young lawyers. And I'm talking about that young guy from out west who came to you with a case. If there are any lawyers out there who feel overwhelmed with cases, like if not Tall Chuck or your firm, like reach out to somebody and have the humility to say, hey, look, I need a little help to get this case over the line. I want to become a master of my trade. But even if you've been in business for 10, 15 years, some people have been that long and never taken anything to trial. And there's a little bit of an imposter syndrome. Like reaching out with some humility to find somebody who can stand by you as your battle buddy to win this case will transform your practice in life. How do those arrangements work if somebody comes to you saying, hey, look, I've got a case here. I've been sitting on it. I've been wanting to reach out for help for a while. How do you approach a case like that?
I had a guy, a young lawyer who's been practicing less than, I think, 2 years or less. He called me a couple weeks ago and he said, Chuck, I got your name off of the listserv. I posted something on Dallas Trial Lawyers that I needed help with. I needed help with an arbitration case, and this guy said, call Chuck. And so he said, I don't know what to do. It's like this defendant's attacking me. They're filing these motions, and I don't know this area. And I said, well, do this, this, and this. Let me send you this document. We did it in this case, and here's what your arguments are. And he called me 2 weeks later, and he said, oh my God, the judge granted it. And he got out of the situation that he was in, and now he calls me, and I see him. I saw him last week at another fundraiser. But those are the kinds of connections where, like, I think that connection and connections like that are like a pay it forward type thing. So I'm not going to charge him when he calls me and I know the answer in 30 seconds because he's never done it. I'm not going to say, well, I need 50% of your case in order to tell you. No, it's just like, here's the answer. Go get them. And if you have something else in the future, call me and let's work together.
Did he leave you a 5-star Google review or
I didn't
something
think
like
about. That's why I have you guys and the marketing guys to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So because you need it, because
Right.
yeah, you are paying it forward, but people have to be able to find you. And if you don't let other people know about these good stories, they don't find you and they go somewhere else. It's worse.
And that gets back to what I was saying earlier: is if we don't tell our story, then who will?
Yeah. And you're so good at telling the client's story. We want to make sure you tell your story better.
It's hard to tell my own story.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to tell somebody else's story, especially since I've been trained to do that. Telling my own story is tough. You can't look at it as objectively.
The one thing that I think has the potential to change, the nation in a way is your passion for helping people who are the victim of security negligence cases. Could you kind of summarize what those cases are and why they mean something to you?
I mean, we hear all the time about slumlords, and it almost becomes cliche to us. And I think a lot of us don't live in situations. We don't know people that live in those situations, so it's kind of foreign to us. But they're everywhere, and these properties are terrible. And, we got a case in earlier this year where, the injuries were bad. It was a drive-by shooting. And, we went to looking at the crime statistics for this property, and it was jaw-dropping. The city of Dallas has an ordinance that if a property has 5 or more habitual crimes committed on it within a year, then it's called a habitual criminal property, and it's a public nuisance. So we go looking for that as like a negligence per se type of thing on a negligent security case. This property had like 50, burglaries and assaults and shootings and all this stuff. And you're like, how is this property still running? And it's because nobody's going after them. And if we as personal injury lawyers are only worried about the one client in front of us and getting some money out of that case to pay them and get rid of them, then we're not doing our job, and these slumlords are free to do whatever they want. Once we start putting a price on their slumlordness and their neglect and their knowing neglect, then all of a sudden the insurance companies who are paying us for what these properties did are like, we're not going to cover you. And we tell the insurance company that it's like, you need to stop covering these people because they're terrible. People are getting hurt and they're dying.
It's an interesting, and no, people don't talk about it enough, but citizens need to know it. And is humans will make decisions that suit them in the short interest. And if somebody has a bunch of buildings and they're a slumlord and they can get away with not keeping the property up to standard and make money, they'll do it. And they actually treat their residents like nothing. They don't care about them as human beings. And it's in your work going in and holding them accountable that, they haven't fixed the lock on a single mom's house or apartment for months, then she gets assaulted. Yeah. Your work and going in and making them pay for that. What I truly respect about you is that your hope is that you can get them all to do what they're supposed to do, so nobody else gets killed.
Right.
But if they don't do it, you're prepared to take on these slumlords.
Absolutely. You said it yesterday at dinner. You were talking about the Ford Pinto case, which is the classic example for us lawyers of a company that knew there was a problem with the Ford Pinto. It kept exploding and kept hurting people, and they made the corporate decision that it was cheaper for them to take the risk and pay these claims. It was cheaper to pay these claims than it was to fix the problem. And these slumlords are doing the same thing. They're saying
what I hate about that too, Chuck, is our society is so tough on somebody who shoplifts at a grocery store, right, and we'll go and we'll hammer them. But the white guys who sat in that boardroom at Ford and said, "Hey, we know that there's an explosion risk, but it's cheaper for us." To me, that's murder.
Yeah.
Right? Because they knew that people were going to die if they didn't record it, and for their own shareholder valuation, they didn't do it, and they got away with it.
Right.
And it's not. And the only thing that brought some compensation was the lawsuit. But I think society at some point has to get angry that financial interest can result in people dying, and they're not charged with anything. But if a poor person does a small crime, we'll throw them away for 15 years. It's
backwards, right?
Yeah.
And we get vilified as personal injury lawyers because we make insurance premiums go up. Well, people are dying.
Yeah.
And I told this story the other day about the tribalism and kind of what we're looking at what we should be looking at in terms of personal injury lawyers.
Explain that again for everybody. That was good.
So getting back to what is the purpose of a personal injury lawyer is to make people safer. A lot of times we'll talk about how we're tribal mammals as human beings. We like to be in a tribe. We like to be in a community. And we don't really get a sense of that living in this country now because our communities are so big. But think thousands and thousands of years ago when human beings used to live in small tribes, like a tribe of a few dozen people, let's say 40 people, are a tribe, a group of people that have decided to live together in travel around an uninhabited Texas to protect themselves. And they take on these different roles within the tribe that we still are trying to figure out how they relate now in our bigger society. But we've got children, we've got people that care for the children, we've got people that cook and clean, we've got warriors that go out and hunt or protect us, we've got leaders that help those warriors, and then we've got the sages and the older wise people that try to guide everybody else in the tribe. And the tribe lives by certain tribal mandates or rules. And most of the time, way back in the day, these things were so primitive that they didn't need to be written down. They were just understood within the tribe. For example, some of the rules might be you wake up at dawn and you do the certain chores in your role that you're supposed to do. And some of those mandates were not as serious as others, right? So if you wake up a half hour late, the tribe's not going to get upset. They're going to say, hey, you need to wake up on time, right? But there's some tribal mandates that are just completely unforgivable when one of the tribe members violates them. So, for example, in today's society, a low rule would be like a mile an hour over the speed limit. If somebody goes a mile an hour over the speed limit and hits somebody and hurts somebody, it's like, okay, were you really being negligent? Yeah, you were speeding, but it's not that big of a deal. But then there's other tribal mandates like sexual assault, abuse of a child, murder, things like that are just completely unforgivable.
The Pinto case.
The Pinto case, right? So now go back thousands and thousands of years ago, you've got 40 people in a tribe, and one of those tribe members violates a tribal mandate, a real serious tribal mandate. What does that tribe do to that person in their tribe that has violated their trust? They outcast them. They send them out from the tribe, which back then was a death sentence. Because the tribe wouldn't kill one of their own, but when they send that person out, they exile them, and they know that that person is likely not going to be able to make it. So to analogize that to what we're doing today is we have to look in our cases for when a defendant has violated a tribal mandate. Not just going a mile an hour over the speed limit, but doing like what Ford Pinto did, doing what these slumlords are doing in the negligent security cases.
Saving money on maintenance if you're a trucking company, which exposes you to higher, likelihood of brake failure, killing families.
Exactly. Yeah. Hiring a massage therapist that's had multiple prior sexual assaults against him, and they still hire him, and then he assaults somebody, and they go, well, how were we supposed to know?
Yeah.
It's like you were supposed to know.
Yeah.
That's a violation of a tribal mandate. And when I see one of those cases come across my desk, I'm like, my entire firm is focusing on this case because this is important. This is our purpose.
And it keeps the tribe healthy to make sure that's and obviously it's not something police can really deal with. So that's a very cool analogy.
Right. The police can't deal with it because it's civil. And if just like with the prosecutor analogy I was talking about earlier, how the prosecutor is supposed to prosecute criminal defendants to deter other defendants. If I'm not prosecuting people civilly when they violate a tribal mandate, then they know there's free reign for them to do whatever they want to do.
And the boundary kind of gets pushed,
It keeps getting pushed and pushed.
And the problem is that this is where, as a tribe, we also have to, because we're a bigger tribe than 40, right? We're the city of Dallas, the state of Texas, the country of America. You have to care about it because the odds are it's not going to be you, but it's going to be somebody who has a family, right? And, if you don't all collectively supervise it, then it could be somebody you love. And if there's nothing in place, you can't bring somebody back to life after they're dead. So that's a very inspirational way of putting it. I wanted when you talked about Pinto, I think it's as good for the for the audience to know something that a lot of lawyers might know, but that McDonald's case, when people talk about, personal injury claims, can you explain why sometimes verdicts are higher and why? And I think it relates to the Pinto.
Yeah, in the McDonald's case, right? I think the McDonald's case has been vilified by the media because people, it's an easy thing to say is like, how do you get millions of dollars off of a hot cup of coffee? Everybody knows coffee is supposed to be hot. But that case, when you look into it, it was McDonald's knew that people were being burned. McDonald's knew that they were hurting people. They knew their coffee was too hot, and they sold a cup of coffee to this woman who spilled it in her own lap and got third-degree burns in her lap from a cup of coffee. And so the final verdict in that one was against McDonald's for, I think it was 2 years of coffee sales, and that's where they got the $2 million.
Yeah.
I may be wrong on the amount of time, but it was something related to what what McDonald's knew and how much their sales were off of making the money, just like in the Ford Pinto case, just like in these slumlord cases, is how much money are they making off of us by not spending anything on safety.
Yeah, and think of it for the listeners is it came out that McDonald's knew their coffee was too hot, but by keeping it hotter, it stayed fresher for an extra 8 minutes per pot, which over a year made them millions of dollars. Right. So how do you change that behavior if the award is only $30,000? They're like, okay, well, we'll pay this $30,000 because we're making millions more. So that's why those numbers are a little higher. That's the way we regulate our tribe, to make sure people are playing by the rules.
And so one of the things when I started learning about trial law from some of my mentors was the reason that I chose them, because there's a lot of people that teach trial tactics around the country. But one of the reasons I really liked the mentors that I chose in what we teach in the Justice College is that they taught and we taught trust our juries. 12 people in a box deciding a case is a lot of really smart people. Emotional intelligence of 12 people working together is extremely smart.
It's a microcosm of the wisdom of the crowds kind of theory, right?
That was the intent of juries, right? And we're one of the only countries in the world that still has juries, and that right is the only leverage that we have as personal injury lawyers against big companies and against big insurance companies is the threat of dragging them in front of a jury of 12 Americans and saying what these people did is wrong, and they're refusing to be responsible for it.
We can almost rename juries tribal councils.
Oh, I love that.
You know what I mean? Like it is a tribal council sitting in judgment of certain actors. I wanted to.
Can you write that down?
Tribal councils.
Tribal councils.